to Iraq war vets to try to figure out what is the best U.S. policy toward Iraq. Pete Hegseth is the executive director of Vets for Freedom. He recently visited Baghdad, where he had served with the 101st Airborne back in 2005. And Jon Soltz is co-founder and chairman of VoteVets.org. Gentlemen, I want you first, Pete, then John, to answer the question. What was the mission of the surge?
The intent of the surge was to bring the violence down to a level where Iraqis could take advantage of it politically. And so with violence dropping in the neighborhoods, Iraqis have been able to first secure their own neighborhoods with Iraqi security forces. And second, Iraqi politicians have had the ability to pass key legislation, which is exactly what they've done. David Schuster mentioned it, debathification, amnesty, provincial elections, $50 billion budget that shares oil throughout the provinces. So Iraqis have taken advantage of this and passed important political benchmarks that the Congress had set, and also in the neighborhood level, where I saw it when I was in Baghdad a month ago. The streets are open, shops are being opened, homes are being rebuilt. There's true reconciliation happening at the neighborhood level as families return.
John, your view of the mission and its success?
Well, look,
or not
the surge has been an utter failure because the purpose of the surge was for Iraqi domestic politics, and the two major Shia militias in the country are at war with each other. The scary militia, which is the Badr Corps and Hakim's group, versus the Mahdi army, which is Sadr's group. And the bottom line was the surge was supposed to disarm these militias. It never happened, and this is why they've been going to battle with each other the entire last week. The core issue in Iraq is the Shia revolution and the control of a Shia Arab state for the first time in the history of the Middle East. And this administration wants to sell us on, Al-Qaeda in Iraq. The surge is a huge failure because it's been a policy of retreat from bin Laden in Afghanistan.
Let's take a look at what President Bush said a year ago about the role of the surge.
Our new strategy is designed to help Iraq's leaders provide security for their people and get control of their capital so they can move forward with reconciliation and reconstruction.
John McCain said something today that was interesting. He said that Iraq, that no longer needs, and Iraq, he posed it like this, an Iraq that no longer needs American troops, no longer needs us over there as combat troops, is a goal that is possible, quote, perhaps sooner than many imagine. Explain that new optimism by McCain if you can. Pete.
Well, I think we are much closer. When I was there in Baghdad 2.5 years ago, there were barely any Iraqi security forces on the street. I was back there a month ago. Iraqi security forces were standing on every single street corner defending their neighborhood. That's how we pull our men and women out and leave behind a stable society, is when Iraqis are able to stand up. And the Maliki government down in Basra is taking the fight to Iranian-backed militias in this part of Iraq.
Exactly. With Americans doing the fighting.
I'm sorry, absolutely. There are Iranian agents that were leading some of the tactics.
Our soldiers are
this is a core point here.
No,
Chris,
the Iraqi army was doing the fighting in Basra.
No, they were backed by they were backed by the United States. And the key issue here is that the policy that we've had for the last 20 years with Iraq and this dual containment policy with Iran-Iraq was destroyed by the neocons and President Bush and John McCain. Iraq was a cork to Iran, and the reason that Iran has growing strength inside of Iraq is directly by the Bush-McCain policies of the last 6 years.
Let's talk about the future. I'm sorry, gentlemen. I want to get to the future here because it's the elections about the future, and let's talk this question. John McCain has talked about a long U.S. presence there in a peaceful mode where we're not taking casualties, not wounded, not KIAs. When would that begin?
Well, I think
when would that period of tranquil U.S. presence, military presence in Iraq
It won't begin.
commence?
It won't begin. It absolutely won't begin.
Let me go to Pete first.
People said it would never begin in Korea. People said it would never begin in Germany.
These are totally different countries.
These things could
this
not
is
happen.
like a Lebanon. You've got multiple groups in this country. This is not Germany.
There are multiple
I lived
groups,
in Germany.
But at the same
it's a homogeneous population. You cannot compare Iraq to Germany.
Okay, hold on, John, for a minute.
Iraq,
your thoughts.
John, Iraq, historically speaking, is a non-asectarian country where Iraq, Sunnis and Shia get along.
The Democrats are talking about keeping our troops that are beginning to pull them out, eventually get them out by, say, 2010, the year after they're in.
Okay.
So that's a ballpark of 2 years. What's the Republican ballpark? How many years of combat over there?
Hopefully not that many more. I mean, I think we're already moving into an advisory role. We're already moving into a role where we're providing air power for Iraqi forces in Basra without our troops on the streets. That's an important differentiation.
But if we're providing air power, you got to bet that the other side's going to be shooting at us.
Would we not give air power to our allies?
No,
when
but wouldn't you get shot back at if you were shooting them?
Sure, but it's much different to have guys in B-52s than...
No, you're missing the point. As long as we're grounded over there on the ground, we're going to have incoming artillery, we're going to have IEDs, because we're the people we're shooting at.
Well, not
at what point you can't have a one-sided war where we're just shooting at other people, they're not shooting back at us.
We are shooting back when we have to.
No, you're missing. Listen closely. Can you imagine the American people in a combat presence or any kind of military presence in Iraq where we're killing people on the other side and they're not trying to shoot at us?
Where we're standing alongside the Iraqi government.
And we're not getting shot at?
Well, no. I mean, you were going to get shot at if we're taking the fight at our enemies.
John McCain says we will stay in there 100 years without getting shot at. When does that commence?
That's if we have an Iraqi government that can do the vast majority
when does this
of the
100 years
fighting
begin?
Well, it's already began. In 100 years, that statement is misconstrued.
No, I just
over
remember
and
what he
over
said.
again.
He said 100 years. John, you do it. He said 100 years without casualties. I'm just wondering when we start not getting casualties. It's not funny.
No, it's not. But it's
when are we going to be in
literally without any casualties?
He said no casualties, no wounded, no KIA.
I mean, it's never going to happen. Chris, they've misunderstood this problem from the beginning. This is not a problem of troops and tactics. It's a problem of diplomacy and strategy. And when General Petraeus speaks tomorrow, it's up to the Democrats to broaden this debate, to talk about the fact that the Army's been decimated by this war, to talk about the fact that McCain and Bush have had us in a policy of retreat from Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan for the last 6 years, to talk about the fact that we're never going to get anywhere in Iraq politically until we deal with the Israeli-Palestinian situation, until we directly negotiate with Iran. It was Iran that helped stop the fighting last week.
I guess the American people have to make a decision in the election. Do they choose a longer duration of military role in Iraq, in fact, an unending presence of military in Iraq? And do they think it someday will turn peaceful? That's a reasonable proposition, you say, right?
I absolutely believe it's a reasonable proposition. We're much closer today than we were before, and we need to stand alongside Iraqi allies that have a chance.
So that's the American people's choice. Do they believe it's
state.
credible that at some point we will find ourselves in a peaceful deployment in Iraq?
More peaceful deployment.
Never will happen. It's a complete misunderstanding of the region as a whole in the Middle East. Our presence in Iraq is flooding Wahhabis into the country. It gives them what he wants, which is an occupation in the middle of the Middle East.
Thank you, John. John, thank you, Pete.
Thank you.
I think you guys have a good argument here. Up next, the witness list is out for the